Chapter 3. Marilla Makes Up Her Mind. Matthew and Marilla took Anne Shirley into the house. Anne didn't say anything, but she had stopped crying. She hated crying because she knew that it made her face as red as her hair. Matthew put Anne's bag near the bottom of the stairs. Marilla spoke to Anne. "Matthew and I need a boy at Green Gables to help with the chores." "A girl would be no help at all," said Marilla. "But since you're here, you'd better eat something. Dinner is ready." "Oh, I can't eat," said Anne. "I am too sad. I am heartbroken." "Can you eat when you're heartbroken?" she asked. "I don't have time to be heartbroken," answered Marilla. "You're too skinny, Anne Shirley, so sit down and eat your dinner." "I can't eat," said Anne. "Everything looks wonderful, Marilla, but when I try to eat, a lump comes right up in my throat. That's what happens when I feel heartbroken." Matthew spoke to Marilla. "I think Anne is just tired," he said. "Why don't you take her up to bed?" Marilla lit a candle and took Anne upstairs to the extra bedroom. Anne put on an old gray nightgown and got into bed. "Good night, Anne," said Marilla. "It's not a good night at all," cried Anne. "It is the very worst night of my life," she said. "I can't sleep on a night like this." For the first time, Marilla felt truly sorry for the girl. Marilla came back and sat on the bed. "If you're not going to sleep, maybe you can tell me about your life," said Marilla. "Well," said Anne, "what I know about my life is boring, but what I dream about is much more interesting." "I don't have time to hear about dreams, Anne Shirley," said Marilla. "Just stick to the facts." Anne sat up in the bed. "I am 11 years old," she said. "I was born in Nova Scotia, Canada. My mother and father were both teachers. My mother died of fever when I was 3 months old. And then my father died 4 days later. He died of fever too. That left me an orphan. I went to live with Mrs. Hammond and her family." "Was that family good to you?" asked Marilla. "They meant to be good," said Anne, "but they had their own problems. Mr. Hammond got drunk a lot, and they had 3 sets of twins in a row," said Anne. "I got so tired of carrying all those babies around. Then Mr. Hammond died. Mrs. Hammond gave all the kids to her relatives and sent me back to the home for orphans. Now I'm at the House of Green Gables," she said. Anne fell back against her pillow. Marilla didn't ask any more questions. She had heard enough. She pulled a blanket up under Anne's chin, picked up the candle, and went downstairs. Marilla found Matthew staring at the fire in the fireplace. "Matthew, I know how much you want to keep that little girl," said Marilla. "Since you seem to want her so much, I think that I could learn to live with her also. She's had a hard life up until now." Matthew did not turn away from the fire to look at Marilla. He did not say anything, but he was smiling. Marilla spoke again. "I've never raised a child before, so I'm afraid that I might mess things up from time to time." Matthew stood up. "She's a very interesting girl," he said. "We don't need an interesting girl," said Marilla. "We need a useful boy. But maybe I can train her to be useful if I can get her to stop talking so much." The next morning, Marilla called up the stairs. "It's time to get dressed, Anne Shirley. Come down to the kitchen for your breakfast." Anne still looked sad as she sat at the table with Matthew and Marilla. But she was so hungry that she ate her breakfast. When they had finished breakfast, Anne asked, "May I help you wash the dishes?" "In a minute," said Marilla. "First we need to have a talk." Anne looked at Marilla and then at Matthew. Anne said to them, "You don't have to say anything. I know that you want a boy. I know that I have to go back to the home. You both have been very kind to me, and I want to thank you," said Anne. "Anne," said Marilla, "when I said that we needed to talk, I didn't mean for you to do all of the talking. Listen to me. Last night, Matthew and I had a long talk. We decided that we want you to stay here after all. We want you to live with us at Green Gables." Anne looked at Matthew and Marilla Cuthbert and burst into tears, just as she had done the day before. But this time, she was crying tears of happiness.